The funny thing is that, like, so technically, like, we've already started the podcast because we've been recording this whole thing. So this is wonderful. So, hello, I'm Seán, and joining me is Mike, and we're here from the War Room Clone Star Pod. And joining us is the amazing John Eaves, the man who, if you follow Star Trek, you need no introduction. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, you know, we're so happy to have you here. Like, thank you so much. I love that at some point we're going through the Eagle Moss ships and it just becomes the John Eaves collection at one point, which is cool. I mean, that is cool.
It's kind of crazy, you know. It was I don't know, when we started on Enterprise, we were the digital Star Trek. We were previously before that all physical models, and it was such a major event to make a physical model and film it that they didn't do it that often. And then when Enterprise started, they had this CG company that we used, and we were averaging like 5-6 ships a show sometimes, and it was just like ridiculously crazy, from nothing to like more than you could ever imagine. So, and they wrote them that way too. Let's have some more ships. So it was very, very cool. So 4 years of Enterprise, I don't know, 9 million ships came out of it.
So we're going from physical kit bashing to digital kit bashing instead.
Yeah, pretty much so.
It is like, it's gas, because it's fun, and actually the Eagle Moss collection is a really good kind of indicator as to that, because sure, the first 100 issues, so many of them are Enterprise just because the ships were there. There was that variety of ships. Like when we think back to Next Generation, and if we go back to season 1, we have the Enterprise D and we have the Stargazer. We got 2 Starfleet ships in season 1. It was wild, I tell you, wild.
Yeah. And what was nice with Eagle Moss in the beginning is they had the CG files, so they could make their miniatures very quickly. Everything else was kind of tangible, so they had to create the CG models of most of those things before they could make the kits. So it was funny to see how they jumped on what they had available and then started adding in. They did some spectacular collectibles.
I guess that helped with the speed of things as well.
Yes.
That's why I'm guessing they were the first batch out, really. It was because they're already digital, they're already there. It's convert and print, as it were, or convert and manufacture.
Oh gosh, yes. And before that, it was the micro machines. You know, those were pretty cool. Except, you know, they were that goofy, funky, weird, flexy vinyl. And so
of course.
It was a hot day that droop and sag, but then Eagle Moss comes along and like, oh, finally, something really cool.
It is. It's funny, actually. So we've just come out of, I think we're on the tail end of a heat wave over this side of the pond, right? And I was actually, the last few days, I'm in Ireland now, but the last few days I was in the UK as well. And so we're like 30 degrees Celsius. But my car, my lovely little car, which was sitting at an airport for 4 days, has the Micro Machines, Deep Space Nine, Stargazer, and Romulan Warbird sitting on the dash. And I'm pretty sure they've just become one horrible mutated Cronenberg-esque thing at this point. Like, you can identify them by the different colors, and that's about it.
Oh my goodness! I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, and it's a really stupidly hot place. But I saved my toys as a kid, and I had a box of Major Matt Mason in the attic, and it would average outside midsummer about 120 degrees, and so in that attic it'd probably add another 20 degrees to it. So when I dug them out, all excited to get them again, they had melted slowly into each other, so it was like this massive John Carpenter thing wad of everything merged together. It was just the coolest thing to see, but the saddest event ever too. Like, oh man, I can't pass these on to my grandkids, but there you go.
It's like the weather stepped in and said, we'll make our own kit bashes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Heat.
Yeah, exactly. The funny thing is that, like, so technically, like, we've already started the podcast because we've been recording this whole thing. So this is wonderful. So, hello, I'm Seán, and joining me is Mike, and we're here from the War Room Clone Star Pod. And joining us is the amazing John Eaves, the man who, if you follow Star Trek, you need no introduction. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, you know, we're so happy to have you here. Like, thank you so much. That sounds like really weird. That's because the genius Mike is going to trim everything I just said and just put it at the very start of this phone call.
And we'll record it and add it in.
Yeah. Oh, well, a pleasure to be here. It's fun to share fellow fan stuff with fellow fans. So it's just a great time. So thank you.
It is our pleasure entirely. Like, so basically, this is you'll either thank me or hate me for what I'm about to say. your career with Star Trek is as old as I am.
That's pretty cool.
I'm roughly the same age as Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. So
Seriously?
So your Klingon canon and me came into being around the same time.
Well, isn't that cool? I'll send you a picture of it then, so you can you can have a little happy birthday born gift. I'll send that out to you.
That would actually be amazing. Thank you so much. I had the pleasure of recently introducing somebody to Star Trek via Star Trek The Final Frontier, and they were like, that was fun. So I just want to say that you are still, through some of your designs, you are introducing new people to Star Trek, and it's just fantastic. So thank you, John. I appreciate that.
How fun. Man, that script for Star Trek V was so fantastic. And it was that was the one they didn't have ILM to do the visual effects. And so you look at the effects and you go, this just doesn't fit right. You know, the ships are such heroes in all the previous movies. And it was funny to start on that one and watch it in the theater and go, ooh, these effects don't kind of hold up to what you're used to. So it was a very interesting show. And good time to Shatner. Boy, he's a hoot to work with. Really a lot of fun. What a guy behind the camera. He's I don't know how to explain him, but he knows what he wants. He knows how to get it. And it was really very cool to see him working. It was like one of the first times I saw an actor turned director work. And great times on that show. A long time ago, but a lot of fun.
That is, it's funny as well, because Five, it obviously, look, it became a bit of a running joke for a while, which I think is not really fair. I don't think it's fair, because it's a lot of fun, and it's got some of the best Kirk, Spock, and McCoy moments of the entire franchise, and it's got a lot of heart. And I'm not just saying that because you literally worked on the film. I do legitimately enjoy the film. Not like that awful film, Wrath of Khan. God, I mean, like, just dreadful.
No one likes that one.
No, seriously. I mean, like, you know, just like, oh my God. No. And it's good fun. And I think that plays into a lot of what I enjoy most about Star Trek is, like, I love the serious episodes. I really, really do. But I love the fun ones just as much.
Yeah, and that beautiful Goldsmith score of Company 5. Right. And it was great they brought him back for that. So I was like, "Ooh boy, we got Jerry back." So there's some of those beautiful themes that he wrote in that. I think it's called The Busy Man was one of the themes in there. That's just a beautiful, beautiful piece if you listen to the soundtrack separate from the movies. That was the title of that. I think it was called A Working Man or Businessman or I forgot the title of it, but really beautiful theme that he had written for Shatner.
It was stunning. And I love as well, because Jerry was really good at this for weaving, say, the existing themes through because like that like theme turns up then again in First Contact in certain ways. I think there's a couple of passages of it in Nemesis. So it was just, I love that score. For me, top score ever. It's still Jerry Goldsmith, but that motion picture score is just unbelievably good.
Oh gosh, yes, and there's a new LP that just came out of that on Star Trek Day. I think it's called it's a new company. I'm not sure what they're called. Take a Ride Records or something with Ride in it. It just came out, and it's a beautiful. I think it's 8 LP version of the motion picture soundtrack, and they got a hold of the actual recordings, and so it's a pretty beautiful transfer. I haven't picked it up yet, but I hear it's just pretty fantastic. So.
That is great. Michael, make sure that we get onto show stuff about that. We all need copies of that as part of this podcast.
I'm literally it's enjoy the ride records.
Enjoy the ride. That's it. Yes.
I'm just because I was busy on Star Trek Day at a Star Trek event, so I haven't had a chance really to catch up on a lot of things. So I went through and looked at some things, but I haven't seen this yet. So yes, I'm now. Oh wow, the vinyls are really pretty.
Yeah, they really did some colored discs, and it's amazing to get that 80 minutes of music that they have on there and that many
6 discs.
It's going to be great.
That is great. Okay, I'm one of those people, like, I will buy an LP player for that.
Yeah.
Because also I am terrible with money, just the worst. Never put me in charge of anything financial. Mike, we okayed paying John the $20,000 for this, right? Like that's gone through, Grant. John, that should be with you today. That is fine. Yeah. But Mike, why are you shaking your head so quickly? Sorry, I don't know what that's about. John, I have to. Sorry, I could talk Jerry Goldsmith music the whole day, but also I could talk ships the whole day. Like, your career with Star Trek is incredible. Like, when we look at what you've given to us as fans, that, I've got the Enterprise E within arm's reach. I was going through an article there the other day. I was writing one about, the Grumall freighter. Like, everywhere I turn, it's like, there's John Eaves, there's John Eaves, there's John Eaves. What's it like for you? I mean, you've created an awful lot of the look of Star Trek for the last 30 odd years.
It's an unusually freaky thing. I'm still a huge fan, and just got that lucky break to work on Star Trek. And back in the day when we were doing the TV shows, we'd split the movie. It was a different kind of world of making movies and TV shows. So we'd split the day. We'd do half on Deep Space Nine, half on First Contact, and the same with Insurrection and Nemesis. And so it was the same art department. And that task I was the only illustrator. We'd have another illustrator come in for the movies. Then they'd kind of take care of the environments and that kind of stuff. And I just always had the ship pile on my desk. And Herman Zimmerman his desk was next to mine, or his office was. So it was just easy to work back and forth with that. And like I said, with Enterprise, it was 5-6 ships per show sometimes in the beat sheets. And to get those 5-6 ships, you draw, I don't know, 25, 30 other ships, and they'd wind up in other things or backgrounds. And so it was just being in this unusual, wonderful circumstance where that task just kept coming to my desk, and it was fun because I love ships. I've always been the ship fan ever since I was a kid. Like, when I grew up in the 60s, so we had the Irwin Allen era going on. We had Land of the Giants and Planet of the Apes, and we had Voyage of Bottom of the Sea. So I was surrounded by sci-fi ships, and to get to kind of do that backwards and design them myself is just the whole day is just like an homage. I just am so thankful that has come my way. You're not very often you get to do something that you love, and the hobby turned into a career was even more fun. But a lot of ships, but it's odd to see them get any attention outside of the drawing table. And so I don't know. I don't do I don't kind of do the spotlight thing too well. I like to hide in the shadows a little bit more. But it's just fun when the tasks come, and all the kind of the ways you think about how you're going to tie in this and tie in that, and having Mike and Denise Akuda behind me. They would do, for example, when we do an Enterprise ship would have something, a new alien race, Mike would design the logo for whatever would be on their uniform or are their props and such. And I'd always tag into what he had done. So if it was a curvy kind of logo, I'd make a curvy ship, or if it was angular, I'd kind of follow what he did with his logos. So really great collaboration, have everyone in there. And it was a different time too, because all of the departments were together. We had costumes a block away, script writers were just across the lot, so we could interact with all these people. With the internet world now and working from home, you don't get that, so you don't see what the final thing is until it ends or comes out on the screen. But back in those days, meeting with everybody, you could really hone in on what a ship was going to look like. And it's just amazing. I didn't even realize how many I had done until the Titan did that art of book on Star Trek, and they were asking for all the stuff, and I had to go scan it. It's like, oh my gosh, I had no idea, so much stuff. But each one is got its own little story and a lot of fun. So good times.
Like, that is, yeah, like, obviously, like, I want to ask about, tell us about the designing of the Enterprise, tell us about, the designing of the Shenzhou, tell us about, like, and I'm going to ask those things, just to be very clear. But okay. It's almost difficult to kind of pick, like, I couldn't even say, like, what is the biggest thing that John Eaves has given Star Trek? Possibly, arguably, I could say the Enterprise E, but then there's so many bits. So do you have what's the first thing that pops to mind when they're like, Star Trek, proudest memory, go?
It's like my favorite thing that I've done to myself.
Or like, say someone's like, what's the biggest thing that you take away from Star Trek? The thing where you're just like, that's my thing, where I'm just like, yes, I'm so delighted that this is the thing that people recognize first, for example.
Oh, I have to say, I was really First Contact really opened the door to a lot of things, and I have to say the Vulcan lander, the T Plana
Oh, lovely.
was my favorite thing, and it goes back to Goldsmith again. When I was a kid, and I'd watch movies that had a Goldsmith score, he would write themes for things, and I remember he did for the Enterprise and in the motion picture and other things he did. He'd write a little theme for whatever it is. Everything had its own little signature in his scores, and I thought, wouldn't it be the coolest thing one day to do something that had a piece of Goldsmith attached to it? And that Vulcan lander coming out of the clouds with that beautiful Goldsmith piece, that's my favorite. I think my favorite of all Star Trek moments. And I actually got to watch him record that piece with the orchestra. And back in the day, our office sat above the construction mill, and there's a little hallway, and you could see when the orchestra would walk through, you could see if they were going to record that day or not. And you'd yell out, "Hey, who you gonna score with today?" And Jerry Goldsmith. And so my friend Doug Drexler and I, we ran over. We got the little directory out. We found out where the recording studio was, went over and met the lady that runs it. Her name was Stephanie, and she let us go in and watch them score. And she had us hide behind, there's a bunch of chairs and there's a sound booth below, and we sat in these chairs below the sound booth so no one below us that walked in could see us, but Jerry could see us from the orchestra pit. And so we kept looking over, and he came and goes, "Hey, who are you guys?" And we said we were from the art department. He goes, "Well, coming to the orchestra." And we got to go out there, and that was the scene they were filming with the Vulcan lander go through the clouds. And Alexander Courage, who wrote the original series, was his orchestrator. And we met him at the same time. It was like one of those days that is like the magicalest moment of Star Trek to me. And to have that ship be a part of that little circle of wonderfulness was just beyond belief. So that's the one that always comes to mind.
That is incredible. I actually didn't know that about Alexander Courage as the orchestrator. So like, what a meeting of minds in the one example. Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah, no, it's funny because he called him Sandy. Jerry called him Sandy, and I guess that was his nickname for him. And he goes, "Hey, Sandy, come over here and meet these guys." And so he comes over and going, "Oh my gosh, it's Alexander Courage!" and Doug and I, we tried to sneak over there every chance we got, and so we couldn't do it too often. And if lunchtime was only an hour, and they broke about the same time, so we'd see a little bit of it every day. But it was wonderful. That was really the magic to watch somebody like that work with an orchestra. So unbelievable. I wish they would have filmed those type of things so you could share them as opposed to when they're in concert, recording the music or playing the music for an audience. But to watch them work it's a whole different world, and just amazing to see.
Absolutely. I mean, it's funny as well. Like, we're all sitting here. Of course, we love these kind of things. I think sometimes somewhere people might think, "Oh, sure, nobody wants to see that." It's like, no, that's the exact thing people want to see. Yeah. Yes, we love to see the performances. Yes, we love to see that. Of course, that goes without saying. But it's the moments that they just happen, and to be a fly on the wall in that is just, that would just be incredible. I'm going to pretend I was there. I'm not going to lie.
Well, it was funny because they would pick a moment in the score. They go, "I want to hear from 185 to 299. Let's go." And they start like you turned on a tape recorder, and you're in the middle of something bombastic. It doesn't warm up. It starts hard and quick, and they're going through this thing, and he'll listen to it, and he'll point over to the end and goes, "Okay, the harp, I need you to go a little bit faster. Flute number 2, I need you to pick up a little bit. I'm going to skip the timpani so you guys stay." He hears every single person in that score, and you're like looking, "Oh my gosh, I just heard a big blast of music. I couldn't distinct the little different instruments." But that's his gift. That's his job to do that, and to hear him do that with the orchestra, just amazing. You never forget seeing that.
Yeah, I like it. That is. It's those moments that just hold on to them. When I see Mike work, I like to think, like, these are the kind of things that, very soon from now, people will be like, I wish I'd filmed that. And that's why I've hidden cameras all over Mike's house.
Really?
Again,
Again, I found all the last ones. Now I got to go hunting again now.
Yeah.
Oh, it sounds like I was joking. Going into Star Trek Insurrection, something I learned from the Eagle Moss collection and from Ben Stories is that obviously you've designed all these beautiful sonar ships, and you obviously keep refining the Enterprise E, and then someone goes and deletes all of the masters. What happened?
Oh, the master CG models of the ships.
I think, am I understanding that right? It was because I know they had to rebuild everything when it was coming around to making
it was we had moved from ILM to Santa Barbara Studios and Blue Sky were the effects companies that did Insurrection, and both of those companies did a lot of the background stuff on the TV shows. They did the planetary atmospheres and planets, and Illusion Arts did the matte paintings, and they all mixed together. And I don't remember why they didn't go with ILM on that. It might have been they wanted to keep the effects closer. And so ILM is in San Francisco, and we were down in Los Angeles, and it was always a trek. It was a pretty big deal too. And that was kind of a little pre ability to do things so easily on the internet. So you actually had to physically go up and see what they were doing. And I think they wanted to try and keep it a little bit more close to home. And so they went with these two companies, and they had to really re-educate the style of the things they did from TV to motion picture size, and beautiful model guys they had on there, and it was quite a task. They had to do a lot of stuff that they hadn't do, and they actually had to incorporate some of the Hunter Grasner models for a lot of the physical stuff, the explosions and the scraping across the top of the Sona collector. But I wasn't aware that the actual files had been deleted, but I can see that happens. Just all kinds of errors go on storage, and the companies dissolve and stuff, and they're probably around, but nobody knows where they are. If that answered your question correctly. So
what was that, Mike? Sorry,
I said they're probably buried in a hard drive in a box to the back of a storage locker or something somewhere.
Someone has a USB key that they don't know what it's for, and it's at the bottom of kind of like a bag or something. Going, what's on this? Oops.
And also with this stuff, Paramount owns movies and CBS owns television. That's kind of the distinction between whose title you'll see on a show. And most of the times they will store those things. Like all the assets will be brought to Paramount if it's a motion picture, and they get stored in various places. They used to have 100 warehouses that would house the sets and the models and all that stuff. And they had a little turn in I want to say 2004, 2005, and they had that Christie's auction, and a lot of things got shelved or moved around from where they once were. So they're probably at Paramount somewhere, and they're just, no one's discovered what they are. And unless someone's honestly searching for that particular thing and has a hint of where to look, it will be lost until someone finds them by accident. Like Metropolis, the old movie Metropolis. Paramount did the U.S. release of that film, and they did the actual cut that made the version we see now. And you keep seeing little pieces come out of hiding, and they find them on film clips at the ends of other movies, and they'll add them back into the original Metropolis. I think it was cut down by 30 minutes, and they just find these things by accident. And I'm sure that is probably what will happen with these assets for Insurrection.
I suppose the other thing with that is they're a very specific file type.
Right.
So even if someone was to get hold of it and plug it into a PC, they're not going to know what they are, because they're going to be a very specific file type, like whether it's a Modo or whatever. They're probably going to get overwritten.
Yeah, and also, different machines played those tapes back in the day, or the information. And so if you don't have those old machines, you're just going to have this data with no way to retrieve it. So that's another issue, that with all the constant changing of formats and the way they create this stuff, it could be sitting right in front of you and you have no idea how to play it.
Yeah. That is so, like, that's something that in actually Mike, through talking to yourself as much as anything else, that I've started to sort of see that it's not as simple as, I'm going to horrify people by the words I'm about to use, opening up Microsoft Word and there's my design for this shit. I've just been banned from any design whatsoever. But you know, it's not as, not everything is backwards compatible or, you know, completely cross compatible. And I can only imagine how frustrating that must be for a designer, for an illustrator, when, you know, it's like, great, here's this amazing thing I worked on. Back to the drawing board.
Yeah. Thankfully, I'm still tangible. I draw everything with pencil and ink and paper, and then scan it and do it in Photoshop to give you the final kind of colored piece. But all that original artwork still exists. So if anything would fail on my end, I still have the original. I could always start over again. But at least that part is unless a flood or fire disaster come along, those are still tangible and accessible. So
I have a feeling that if you ever decided to, like, I don't know, buy a small country, if you were to auction off any of those originals, the Trekkies would have your back. Like, yeah. I'm sure you would do fine if they ever went to auction.
Well, you know, it's funny. I looked at those as sentimentality pieces, and each one had something special with somebody I worked with. And like I was saying, it was a big collaboration. And so every time I open the boxes or file things and stuff, I'll look at those, and those memories come back. And so it's one of those things where I'll probably have those until the day I pass on. But it's a box of memories when you open them up. And I go, oh gosh, that's when me and Doug did this, or Jim Van Over and I did that, or the day we teased Herman, this ship came out of it. So they all have a funny story behind them, and it's interesting. But I looking at, you know, Greg Jean, correct? The
yes.
model maker.
Yeah.
He if you get on the Heritage auction, his catalog just came out. And talk about a fan of Star Trek. He did the same thing. He kept everything out of sentimentality. So you should check that out. A lot of Star Trek history on there that no one knew existed. So it's pretty cool.
That is for sure. Like, one of the things that we love particularly is these stories that, like you're saying, that these, today we teased Herman's Merman with this, and this ship came out of that. That is worth so much to people like us who are like, you know, we just get to drink in these stories as well, which is just so much fun. And that, like you were saying about having to physically run over, say when you're checking on updates with this or that. I was just reading there, it was actually on Memory Alpha, which is just one of my favorite websites. Thank you again to the people at Memory Alpha for just existing. But like working with Greg Jean back in those days, and sorry, just because it's jumping up ahead, can I just say how much I loved the Enterprise B redesign of the Excelsior, and always have. I have always loved that, and I've today found out that was you. Thanks, John. I love that ship.
Thanks. That was my introduction to Star Trek art. So it was like, wow, this is really cool. So before that, you know, it was little prop drawings, but yeah, Herman gave me that like immediately. It's like, oh my gosh, what will we do? And he brought in, we had to build on something that existed because it was a budget issue. And visual effects, like I say, when it's a model, it's a big deal. And so we had a choice of 2 or 3 other ships, and the Excelsior was one of them. And I go, oh, please, can we use the Excelsior? One of my favorite ships. He goes, why not? And so it kind of had to follow the script savvy, because we had that energy ribbon that whips a piece of the ship but doesn't destroy it. And so what can we do? And then I was an old aviation fan. And the old PBY is an old flying boat from World War II. It's kind of a observation and rescue plane, and it had this beautiful boat fairing on the bottom. I go, man, the Excelsior would just lend itself perfect for this. We can do these little side fairings, and when that ribbon hits, it just needs to clip that, takes the little piece out, and it doesn't destroy the whole ship. And you can just have Kirk stationed in that particular spot that's where he's doing the repairs. And so it wound up working out really good. And it was a lot of fun to just make things that you could add on to the Excelsior without altering the ship and keeping Bill George's lines intact. And that was a very, very fun thing. I actually got to go see the miniature, which it's really, you can't call it that because it was huge. But it was good times. That was a long time ago, but that was a really fun ship to do.
So I'm just looking at this the Gregory Jean collection. which has
Yeah.
got probably one of the biggest white whales of all of sci-fi, which is the Lost X-Wing model.
Yeah, and I didn't even know he had that, which is
No.
funny because I have the
Everyone thought it was destroyed years ago. No one ever thought it was alive. It was in pieces. But yeah,
Right.
apparently it was in his collection this whole time.
Yeah, he had some amazing stuff in there, and
Yeah.
and what you're seeing in that catalog, it's not even a 0.05% of what he collected. So you're just seeing the super cool stuff, but he had so many really fantastic things that he collected.
There's the original tricorders from TOS in there. There's original uniforms. There's Kirk's formal dress tunic with the little triangular thing you do higgies on. I can't remember what they're called off the top of my head. There's so much in here.
Yeah, there's even a handful of stuff from 1941 in there.
Yeah.
A little bit of Close Encounters. What's fun though is he was a huge serial fan from the 50s and 60s, and he wound up collecting all of those pieces that he could get. And he just actually picked up the Commando Cody rocket ship that they had probably 7-8 years ago.
Yeah.
And he was like so happy to get that. You go over to his house and he goes, "Guess what I just got?" And he pulls it out of the garage like, "Oh my gosh, that is so cool. Commander Cody's ship," and he collected that stuff like crazy. So it was always a treat to go visit him because it always have something new to show you. But yeah, he everything was a major piece of fantastic stuff that he grew up with. So everything was sentimental to him as well. But cool to see that stuff go out, and hopefully we'll all get good homes. And the best part, you just hope it goes to a good home.
There's so much here. Some of this stuff is incredible. You've got Klingon disruptors from the motion picture. You've got Enterprise B LCARS panels on Transflex. Filming miniature for Galileo 5. It's just like you go through this. It's just like, oh, okay.
Yeah. And a lot of times he would make a lot of the Star Trek models that we were working on for TNG or Deep Space Nine. He'd do a lot of that stuff for free in exchange to keep the models in the end. And that was always kind of important to him. And so he would like to hang on to that stuff. And it was great to know that it would always, if he could, it would be at his garage. So you go check it out later. But it was fun. It was fun to have him be your boss on those things because you knew you could see it again forever.
That is like, I mean, I can only imagine because like I did my very best to keep Eagle Moss in business, but unfortunately one person wasn't enough. But I love to collect. I love having the tangible feeling of, say, a ship or something in my hand, a bit like, Data in First Contact, the idea of touching something, make something feel more real.
Yeah.
And I mean, even today I had a delivery of them. The Franklin from Star Trek Beyond arrived today. So like I'm still collecting. But the idea of if I were another man and I knew that there had been a garage somewhere in the States that was full of the original filming models of all of these, anyone would need to know is when you see that garage has been broken into, just know I'm keeping them safe. They will be safe. They will be very well cared for.
Funny enough, I found the most appropriate piece here, which is the Enterprise E's dedication plaque. Is up for sale on the auction, which I think for this interview is probably the most apt thing that's on that auction, to be fair.
Yeah, each ship had a different one too, which is funny for all three films. So each one's a little bit different, and it would go to the production end. And so a lot of the behind the scenes crew was the same, but when you get to the production group or the VFX group, those names would kind of flow through and change. Mike Okuda was always on top of giving as many people credit as possible, and that plaque was a great way to do it. And it's fun because all three of them are just a little bit different. So I'd have to look at his to see which movie it's from that he has. I'd imagine it's First Contact, but
it is First Contact, yes.
Okay. And so he actually was did a little bit of work on all three movies, doing kind of study models. And for Nemesis, he did the Scorpion model, and Insurrection, he did a beautiful big model of the Sona collector, and I have all the parts for that at the house. He gave them to me after the filming of it, and it's a big stinking model, and
Yeah.
that was kind of the way you do CG models back in the day. You'd build a physical model and then you'd scan it and then make your 3D model from that. That was the big deal with Insurrection, is we had to make a lot of the miniatures. Well, Greg did these smaller stuff. Blue Sky did like the hollow ship, and they did the Sona, the fighter that flew around a little bit. So all of those things were built practically quickly first, so they could do scans. There was no color, nothing. It was just a model that they could use to scan for all the details, and then of course, enhance all that stuff once it was in the CG world. But it was an interesting way to see that happen, and I don't think they do that anywhere near like they used to, if at all. But it was a great way to see that happen, and he always collected all that really silly, goofy, cool things that didn't matter to anybody except to him. So it was cool.
So you said earlier on that you're still a pen and paper man, or a pencil and paper man.
Yeah, I actually just bought the pencil I used. They don't make it anymore, and I did
Now,
it.
I was just about to ask you, did you manage to get hold of a 20060?
I did. There's a place called Chromacolor in the UK.
Yep.
Someone turned me on to it, and I called them up, and they had an unlimited supply. So I think I bought 12 boxes of those pens. And Ben Robinson just wrote this morning. He goes, "I know a place. I'll get more." And so I don't think I'll run out ever again. Thank you.
I know Dave posted that on Twitter a couple of weeks ago, and there's a company called MSC in the US, and they have them in stock as well.
No, I actually called them first. I made the order, and then I got an email back. "Oh, sorry, that item is discontinued. We no longer carry it." So
I was going to say, because it shows as being in stock on their website.
Yeah, it says available, but the moment you make your order, you'll pay and you'll get the shipping information, and then you'll get the note back. "Sorry, we don't have those access to those anymore." So,
damn it. Well, at least you got them. That's the main thing.
Yeah, the first pack just arrived Saturday, and so I got a second one coming today or tomorrow.
Oh, good. So that's your primary, is it? So is that what you sketch out in first and then flesh out around that, or?
Yeah, I used to use a traditional the kind of the dark carbon pencils, and when I met Jim Martin, he was one of the illustrators on Deep Space Nine. He used this blue pencil.
Yeah,
and I go, "My gosh, that is so cool!" And back in the day, you could do a blue pencil drawing, and once you got it right, you could ink black ink with your pen over the top of it, and when you take it to the copier, the blue pencil would drop away. So all you would have is this ink drawing, this black line drawing, and that was the purpose of that particular pencil. And I took up that same style that he kind of designed, doing the two things, and that was all the way through all three movies. We had the same copier at the art department, and that literally that blue pencil would drop away and you just have a black line. Then you could make a copy of that and color it over the top, or scan it and color it in the computer. But it was basically a technical process, that pencil, as opposed to an art choice. But I just grew to the point that I love that pencil, so that's the one I use all the time.
Oh, okay. Because I mean, I suppose a lot of the time, if you were to draw in pencil, then ink over the top, and then erase out the pencil, you normally smudge the ink.
Exactly, and you don't have to worry. You didn't have to worry about that with that pencil. So it was, unless you drew really hard, those lines did have to go in.
Well, I'm now going to be placing an order for those myself now. Bearing in mind they're 45 minutes down the road from me.
Yeah, definitely grab some, because they're pretty stinking cool, and it's they have the eraser on them. It's one of the best erasers ever. It erases everything, and so even things that shouldn't be erased, it does a good job on everything. White pencil, it takes white pencil off black paper. It's excellent pencil.
Okay, I will definitely be ordering some pencils.
You should just name them the Jim Martin Indigo Blue, and that should be the name of that pencil. Jim should get all the credit for that one.
They should make a limited run that just have his name embossed in the side of them.
Oh gosh, yes, that would be perfect.
So I'm guessing they haven't replaced that then with another shade. I'm guessing that's why they've killed it.
Well, they have a non-photo blue. They have a couple. That brand has a couple other pencils that are available. Yeah. They just aren't the same. They don't. I don't know. They just don't do the same thing that Indigo Blue did. And
Right.
I have all of them and have used all of them. And yeah, I have a box of those as backup. And like, oh no, I don't want to use that horrible pencil. I want the one I like. So
It's one of
I
those
don't
things,
know. I'm
isn't it?
not too picky on too many art supplies, but that one's that's the golden rule pencil. So
Well, if you know what you like,
mhm.
why change it? You know, if it
Yeah, but that
works,
was
it
a
works.
heartbreak when I found out they were gone. I went to pick some up. It's like, wait a minute, where'd all my pencils go? And it was a heartbreak. Within like a minute, I found out they didn't have them anymore, and they weren't making them again, except in the set. You had to buy like a box of 58 pencils to get
Oh,
one indigo blue out of it. It's like, oh no, it's just evil.
so
But
what you're saying
any
is,
of the. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, so what you're saying is, when I look through the book, because I have the book, the Art of John Eaves book. So when I go here and I look through and I see all these sketches of Borg cubes and Borg spheres and all of these things, and they're all this kind of bluey color, is that because they were done with indigo blue?
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And in that case, I had a scanner, and the scanner picks up the blue, a big uh, scanner that I'd use to scan stuff when I'd take it right into the digital world, and it would pick it up. It picks up everything as opposed to the copier, the Xerox machine we had in the back
Yep.
that was designed to drop that blue. And so you had the best of both worlds with the scanner or the copier. And I kind of like the way the blue looked. And
Yeah.
it's kind of when we'd present those as sketches for meetings, I'd do that, just the blue drawings, and it really laid it out on the display boards that okay, it's in progress, it's a working the go. So it kind of played its role in definitely when you present it to a producer or a director, they could clearly see that this is just something that's in the works, as opposed to if you turn in something that's colored. And it's very interesting because you have to figure out what type of personality your directors or producers are. Because if you show them something that's more finished, sometimes they think you are trying to tell them what they need to know, as opposed to their feedback or an input going to you. It looks like you're trying to tell them what to do. It's a the personalities behind everybody's a little bit different, so you kind of have to work with them to figure it out. But as long as you turn something that looks like it's a sketch and in progress, you get a lot more positive feedback and positive work environment with these folks. So
Gotcha.
it just depends, like I said, what the personality is.
I suppose this is probably the longest conversation we've had on a pencil. To be fair.
No, I'm going to jump in those again, and there's going to be someone who is delighted that this now is a recorded conversation because they're like, finally, someone who is speaking my language.
Yeah, very true, very true.
Good.
So, okay, this is probably one of your questions, Sean. So I apologize in advance. What was the process for creating the Enterprise E?
It was really interesting, and because we were doing Deep Space Nine at the time, and we get these little things called beat sheets, and it's a very, very short 8 to 10 page. It's not a script, but it kind of talks about the story points. And it will tell you kind of, okay, we're going to have a back in time issue where we do a flashback to a different era. We're going to have the Borg reintroduced. We're going to have a new starship. We're going to have the Zephyr Cochrane circle in this. So it's very rough, and you get an idea of kind of what the script is going to come. And we got that just before the holiday came to be. I don't remember if it was Thanksgiving or Christmas, but it was before a break. And Herman comes over, and we're going over the Deep Space Nine drawings. He goes, "Oh, by the way, did you read the beat sheet?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Okay, you got to get going. We got a new Enterprise to do." I was like, oh, "Wow!" I was so because they needed one from scratch, a brand new one, as opposed to the B where I was transforming something else. And it was like the most exciting and horrifying conversation I ever had. And so I went immediately home and dug out my VHS and watched the best of both worlds to get an idea of what all the Borg had to be. And I started doing sketches and stuff. And after the break, I came back, showed all the sketches to Herman, and I had built the D model with Greg Jean many times for the show, and it was a very elegant ship, that that Andy had come up with. But when you get on stage with the VFX filming crew, they'd always say the same, like, this is the hardest ship to film because if you shoot too low on the front, it looks like it's front heavy, and if you film from the back, it looks like it's falling over. So they really had to do a lot of work to balance that ship to make it work for a visual effects shot. And I remember hearing them always have some kind of comment about that. And I thought, wow, if I ever did an Enterprise, I'd make something that would be friendly to the VFX guys. And so that was kind of the first idea I thought, is making something that would work with VFX guys. But I was drawing very short nacelles, and I thought that was the progressive architecture of the time. And so I did a whole bunch of Enterprise IE ideas and showed them to Herman, and he goes, "Oh, by the way, you don't have to use the short nacelles anymore. This is theatrical." And I go, "Oh my gosh, that makes sense now." I didn't realize the E was drawn so you could fit the whole thing on a TV screen in one shot. And that was the difference between short nacelles and long nacelles, is TV to cinema. So we got to go to the longer nacelles. And then the script came out, and reading that a little bit heavier, I'm going, oh man, this ship is taking a beating like no other. And so I thought, I'm gonna have to design this a little bit differently, where it's more stable under that type of circumstance, the battles that were going on. And so I love Star Trek 2. When I went and rewatched that again, I thought, well, that neck is a pretty weak design area for a starship. And if Khan had fired just 2 more shots, that neck would have broken off. And I got to think, I got to make something that's a little bit more squatty, a less visible target, a less visible area of weakness. And so I kind of elongated the saucer, switched the D saucer forward instead of sideways. And Herman was right next to me, kind of working along with it. And so we kind of came up with that idea that was the final version. And it was very different from what an Enterprise looked like before that, but we had to design it basically for fighting the Borg. And ILM took it from there. We had to make a study model so they could figure out, because I was kind of new at drawing, and it was kind of hard to put all those ideas in a view for a model maker. So I thought, if I make a model, a study model, they can see that better. And so they took it. Bill George and John Goodson took that study model, and then they tweaked that, and then we kind of worked back and forth together to figure out what the final ship was going to be, and the nuances, the details. Rick Sternbach started doing blueprints, and he got probably about 75% of the way done, and he got taken on to something else, and ILM filled in those blanks. But it was really fun to watch that process work. And overall, what the ship had to be, I think it turned out being what it needed to be for that. And it was very fun to do, and like seeing a lot of the feedback that comes back, it seems like everybody enjoys it. So it worked out on good fronts, professionally and as something that people that are a fan of the ships like I am liked. And so it worked out really good. And I didn't have internet at the time. I didn't know how to do it. So Mike would come out, he'd tell me stuff. Hey, there's a review on the E. Most of the people like it. And he'd go back in his office. Okay, that's great. That's great to hear. So, you never want to be led by good critiques or bad critiques. So I try not to read those. It definitely influences what you do after that. So, but no, that it turned out to be a really fun project. I was really happy with the end result, and the VFX guys liked it, and it really made a beautiful presence on the screen. So I was really, really happy how that turned out. Like I said, it was a collaboration of a bunch of us. So good times.
It's probably I think it still is. It's very controversial, and I'm going to say it, so please don't hate me, but it's my favorite Enterprise.
Oh, like my favorite is the motion picture, the refit. The original and the refit were the two that just made me so happy. And so, you use those as inspiration. But yeah, everyone has a favorite Enterprise, and those two are mine. And I'm glad you like the E. So that's fun.
I think for me, it's just one of those things where, I mean, I was 7, 8 when it first came out, when Insurrection came out. And I remember when my dad got the VHS and we sat down and watched it. And obviously I'd watched TNG all the way through, so it was nice to sort of see the crew back together again. But I was just at that age where it made more sense. So it's always stuck with me all this time. And it's, very closely followed up by the D. But yeah, the Enterprise E is still my favorite.
Oh, that's fun. It was cool too because we got to go up to ILM and watch them build the filming miniature, and we saw it in the stages of being built, and then when it was on the stage being shot. And they added so much cool stuff, lots of little secrets in there. And on the top of the saucer, about midway down from the bridge, there's 4 or 5 of these big, long, elongated windows. And when you look inside the miniature, the inside's all lit. What they did to add dimension to it is they took little 35 millimeter slides of the Enterprise D sets, and they put them behind the windows, and they were on a piece of magnifying glass.
Yeah.
And so when they would go by the screen, you'd have this little bit of dimensionality back there, and you'd actually see something in the windows. But in this particular room, they built a little set. It's a conference room. It has a table, and on the ground is the outline of a dead guy laying on the floor. And I forgot what the story was. I think they had trouble with a producer or something, and so that represents his dead body on the floor. But they had all kinds of these little silly things going on in there, and that one always stood out as like, oh, there's been a murder on the Enterprise. This is pretty cool.
That's what I bet it was that famously unpleasant director Jonathan Frakes. Yeah,
Yep.
definitely him. Yeah.
Jonathan Frakes. Oh, that guy is the most amazing man. He's a big giddy kid on top of everything else. Fabulously talented actor. I think he's even more so behind the camera.
100%.
But what a guy! And he admires everybody's talents, and he recognizes what everybody does, and he's always the first guy to compliment you on what you're doing, or give you a nod like, wow, that's looking good, you guys are working really hard over here. And that's the way he is. And so working with him was just a treat and a half. Just a cool guy all the way around.
I literally now. I mean, I know this is the internet, so I really hope this doesn't age like milk. I have never heard a bad story about Jonathan Frakes ever. And there's always kind of like Patrick Stewart was in a bad mood one day, or Marina Sirtis stubbed her toe and spilled her coffee. There's always something like that. Never heard a bad word about Frakes.
I don't know.
No, he's just happy, and I think he feels the way as all of us do. He's a fan at heart, and he's just excited that every day he gets up and he gets to be a part of the thing he loves. So it's just an outlook. Of LeVar Burton is the same way. Just they love the show, and they love what they do, and they love being a part of it.
The only thing I would say on that one is don't forget Frakes broke the glass on
that's right. Oh yeah. Did you hear about, because
on the Elios
about sure you were working on Picard's we did an interview with Lewis before, and apparently Frakes, famous for sitting on things that maybe shouldn't be sat on, sat on part of the Elios screen and broke it.
Yeah. It was an interesting show, Picard, because we all had to work from home because we had COVID hit in season 2, and then the mask mandate and all that stuff. So if you weren't necessary to be on the set, we all worked from home. So we didn't get to see any of that great stuff, and so we just heard about it. But yeah, Liz was on set, and so she got to live, and Dave Blass as well got to live and enjoy these, and they'd tell us the stories in the afternoon when we'd have our meetings, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Wish I could be there to see this.
I just actually, just to continue just on the Enterprise E for a bit, I know that between First Contact, Insurrection, and Nemesis, there is slight differences. Could you kind of settle debate? What are the biggest differences between the 3 Enterprise E's that we got in those movies?
Yeah, the Enterprise E in First Contact was a miniature, and John Knoll did a CG version for particular shots, but primarily it was the last Enterprise built as a physical model. And so with that, there was a lot of little things I thought when I saw the show, I go, whoa, if I could tweak that a little bit, or this a little bit, I sure would fix it. It was more artist looking at their work and wanting to fix it a little bit kind of thing. And it was just little tweaks and stuff. And so when Insurrection started, it was going to be the first full CG version of the ship. And the gentleman making the model, I kind of tweaked the design just a little bit, brought up there was a curve on the bottom of the main hull. And when Rick drew the plans, he does the taper and then it goes straight. And in the kind of the design I did, it has more of a circular flow to the bottom, a little bit more rounded area. And that was the one thing I tried to fix. And from the side, the saucer has a very abrupt cut, the back of the saucer to where the hull starts. From the profile only, it had a kind of abrupt kind of design area there. And I thought, I'd like to taper that a little bit more so it flows. So those two things I did, it was just a kind of a flowing idea I had. And they did a little bit of that, not that much. And so it looked pretty good. I was happy with it. And then when Nemesis came up, we went to Digital Domain. And again, a new model had to be built, a little higher res model for the shots that we had to come up with. And I got that idea again. I could tweak it again. And so they went with what I had for Insurrection and added a couple other things. And with Nemesis, we had to add more ballistics to the ship because it was basically a forward firing vessel at the time. And then reading the script for Nemesis, it's attack from all points. And looking at that design again, I'm going, there's not a lot of defense in the back. So added phaser strips on the nacelle struts, rear firing torpedo launchers on the back of the saucer, a couple more on the bottom. So it's pretty much a 360 defensible attack ship now. And so had to add all of those details in. We did that sweep I was telling you about on the saucer a little bit more intently to the hull. And then they had that model going. And then we found out there's going to be a final version for the next movie, the movie that didn't happen. And so when it's in space dock, I got to do all of those little details that I couldn't put on the other versions prior. So I set out a set of blueprints. You might have seen them. They're out kind of floating around. If not, I'll send them to you. But that's what it was going to actually look like. So they're going to be kind of they're very minor tweaks, but they were just to make the nuances look a little bit different and hone in the shapes a little bit. But that's why there's so many differences. Each company makes their own version of the Enterprise and just had the permission to tweak things a little bit. So that's why you have all those versions.
So I'm guessing that's why when you compare all three versions, they're all different lengths.
It's only a 2 foot. It's actually only a 2 foot difference between First Contact and Nemesis, and it was because when I raised the nacelle struts up, it just mathematically the back of that nacelle moved a little bit. So it's 2248 in First Contact and 2450 in Nemesis. So just a 2 foot difference.
Yeah,
I love that because that's going to be a tiebreaker question in a quiz at some point. What is the length in this film? What is the length in that film to the closest centimeter?
Yeah, so that's your only difference is between Nemesis and First Contact, 2 feet.
Because my friend Tim, bless him, Tim Davies, who does a lot of the schematics and stuff, and he worked quite closely with Dave on the Stargazer on season 2 of Picard. Mm-hmm. He lined up all three of the master systems displays and worked out the lengths. So on First Contact, it was 24 decks at 685 meters. And then on the studio model, the physical model, it was 795 meters. And then in Nemesis with the CG model, it was 26 decks. So it has 2 additional decks, and it's 778 meters.
Right. Yeah, that deck thing, you'd never know it until you'd see the film and they do it in dialogue. 26 decks. It was 23 before. 22. And so it was just it was always very funny to hear that going on. And we could never figure out where to put that shaft that the Raymond falls in Nemesis. There's that deep, dark shaft. Oh. That Frank pushes him in. It's like, where in the world would we put that?
I love that. I mean, like, people could say what they like, but I love that the bottom of the Enterprise E is actually a TARDIS.
Yeah, exactly.
It's great. It was funny actually because you mentioned, Mike, like the year First Contact came out. So for Christmas that year, Santa Claus brought me the original toy that came out, the promotional toy that came out with First Contact. And of course, it was obviously based on a slightly earlier design because the Bussard collectors are completely different. And I still have it somewhere in the house because they didn't have the, I'm going to call it, say, the closing piece over the red. It was just, it was kind of, in a way, closer to the Enterprise D in that they were elongated, but it was just the red bit of the Bussard collectors sticking out the front of it. And I remember, at whatever years old I was, when it came out on VHS, so I'd seen it in the cinema, and then Santa Claus came along and I got the toy, and I was watching it on VHS, and I was looking at the model in my hand, and I was looking at it on VHS, and I went, there's something is different, and I can't quite place what it is. So I'm guessing it was just that, I mean, as these designs go out at whatever stage of production, and then, the toy companies kind of run with it. I suppose similar on Generations with the uniforms on all of the characters as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Playmates did that. And those poor guys have a deadline. They have to, for assembly, to get a toy out, and to match the date they were given for first contact. They were given a kind of preliminary sketch. We had done some hand-drawn blueprints and stuff, and that's what they went from. And it was nowhere near the final piece. The Phoenix is the same way. They're a little bit closer on the Phoenix. We had a little bit tighter drawings on that one. But those poor guys have to run with what they have at the moment. And I felt bad because they do their best and they do beautiful work, but they just didn't have the information to make that one be what it needed to be. And the same with when they were putting out the characters for Generations. There was a scene where Shatner does this kind of solar skydive, and he has a silver suit, and that piece actually they actually made a figure of it, so you can get him in that silver. It's like little squares of mirrors to deflect the atmosphere, science fiction wise, and so you can actually get that. And they used in First Contact, they used the test sketch helmets, so they're not the actual helmet that was used in the film. It was the test helmet that we drew up as a concept. So it's sad that they have to go with what they have at the moment, and but they always do beautiful stuff. So you get these little quirky things that are more collectible, I think, than the actual, if they would have done it more accurately or had the time to do it accurately.
That's funny as well. And actually, funny that you reminded me there of that skydiving suit. That was one of those great reused props that Voyager, I think, that it turns up in an episode of Voyager as well. Roxanne Dawson, whose birthday it is today as we are recording. So happy birthday, Roxanne Dawson. Blana Torres, she goes skydiving several times in one episode. So, and I'm pretty sure someone just said, look, we've got a suit. We've got to use it. And Roxanne Dawson is apparently exactly the same height as William Shatner. So there you go. This is what we're going to do. We'll do it this way. And it's just funny.
Oh yeah, and it was fun with Star Trek because they saved everything. And so when we'd get like new sets or stuff we'd have to design, we'd go over to the warehouse and walk through stuff like, ooh, look, we can just alter this or alter that. And it was an incredibly huge way to save on a budget that's pretty tight already to do sets when you had that cache of things to go through. And we use that all the time. We'd use stuff, we'd crisscross shows from one show to the other, movie to TV and vice versa. And it was really a cool asset. And it was even more fun to just go hang out and look at all the cool stuff, because they had rebuilt the Enterprise corridors and bridge for the DS9, the Trials and Tribulations episode. And so sitting in this warehouse, you have the original series bridge they rebuilt sitting there in the corner, and the hallways. And it was like, oh my gosh, it was just an exciting kind of dark museum of all this cool stuff to see all the time.
Yeah, I don't think me and Sean will ever be allowed in there because I think we'll end up with stuff going missing.
Yeah. And again, you just have to say it might go missing, but it will be safe. It will be treated better than we would treat our own families. And you know what? If our families are listening to this, they'd understand.
Yes. Well, there certainly was a sea of cool things. So you'd need about 8 cars every day to get all the stuff you'd want. But there was a lot of cool stuff.
Cool. Mike will organize that, yeah? Yeah.
Yep, definitely.
Great, cool.
Make notes, don't worry.
And of course, this is one of the wonderful things about your career. It keeps on going. I mean, Star Trek does a big, massive reboot in 2009, but there's one name that remains. Mr. Eaves hopping universes at this point. What was that like? Suddenly, do you have this? So, like, for real now, you're sitting there and you're like, right, okay, got to forget everything that went before because we've got to. This is a new aesthetic. This is a new look. What was that process like?
Oh, that was a very interesting series. I knew Scott Chambliss, the designer, before. I had interviewed with him on one of the Mission Impossible movies. And he goes, well, I'm kind of got a full art department here, but we have Star Trek coming up, and I'll give you a call on that when it comes up. And I go, oh, hot dog. And he calls me when they started, and he goes, I got good news and bad news. Good news, we're starting a Star Trek movie. And the bad news is no one from a previous Star Trek is allowed to work in any capacity on the new show. They want all new blood. They want all new ideas and concepts. They want to recreate it from the ground up. And he goes, so I can't bring you on, sorry to say. And like, oh no. So I was all bummed for a while. About 7 months into it, I get a call back. And he goes, I had to let some illustrators go. They went on to other shows. And if you promise me you won't be influenced by the other shows, I'm going to hide you away in the back room. And you could just kind of design what I'm asking you to design without that uh, kind of, I don't know, influence from the other stuff. We'll give you a go. So he gave me a month test, and it worked out. And so I wound up being on there 6, 7 months. And it was interesting to watch that. I just kept my mouth very, very, very shut. But they would bring things in the art department that we used on the other shows, but they didn't know it. And they go, look at this really cool piece of set design we found at the junkyard. This would be fantastic for the Klingons and the Romulan stuff. And they go, that's pretty cool. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, we already discovered that. But it's funny to see everyone's point of view is still the same. They're still designing Star Trek with the same ideas in mind, and they find the same things by accident without knowing. And so I would just sit there very, very quietly. And a friend of mine, Jeff, they did the same thing with him. He came in, he's a graphic guy. He just came in from working on the Firefly Serenity series, and they asked him if he could design some things for us. And he was sitting next to me, and they asked him to do a deck count of the Enterprise in kind of a profile form, and it was big. I think they whatever decks they asked for, like 100 decks or something. It made the Brian Church Enterprise like 3.5 miles long, and so he lined that up with a profile of the other Enterprises, like profiles, just to show this massive difference in size. And I would have done the same thing. And he comes back from the meeting. He goes, I don't know. I don't think that meeting went too well. And I go, what do you mean? And at the same time, the art director comes in. He goes, I'm sorry, we have to let you go, Jeff. You're too close to the other shows. Like, ooh, egad! I learned a valuable lesson about really definitely keep your mouth quiet and just draw and use what you know that they're asking you for without talking about it. But it was very, very tight, protective group that they had to watch those rules quite hard. So I got in. I was very happy, very lucky. I got to work with Scott. Great guy. He has a whole different point of view how he designs things. Like with Herman and the designers before, they all look at things as kind of a sci-fi advancement from what we've already done. And with Scott Chambliss, he finds household items and he goes, ooh, wouldn't this be cool? So when they were doing the mining ship, he was at home and he had a block of knives and he's looking at those knives and he goes, wouldn't that be cool? So he took a picture of it and gave it to James Klein. He goes, this is what I want the bad guy ship to look like. Design something around this pile of knives. And so it was very cool to see two different points of view reaching the same goal cinematically. But yeah, I was very, very lucky to get on that. Then by the second JJ film, that rule had kind of gone away. So a lot of us got to come back and then it went away completely by the third one. So, but yeah, lucky break to get in on that.
Because it wasn't just ships, was it, that you did for, I'm going to call it the Kelvin universe as a whole? Because I know you did did you do some of the shuttles, if I remember correctly?
Yeah, I kind of did shuttles and a kind of a lot of little environmental pieces. And I, at the end, they had a prop supervisor named Russell Bobbitt. And he lost his illustrator, and they sent me over to work with him. And so we were in a basement underneath the Paramount lot, and we wound up getting a really good friendship going. We wound up doing Marvel movies and stuff forever after that. So he was a great guy to meet. And so I think I did my whole Marvel career with him at the helm. But Star Trek, that was the one and only Star Trek he did, and did a really beautiful job with it. And he grabbed that aesthetic immediately, what they were trying to get. and I kind of did the tail end of the props with him, but it was cool. It was really cool, and then they kind of floated you around. Like I said, they had me hidden. I wasn't in the art department. I was in the trailer with the transportation guys, and usually you don't want to be over there because they're all the rude and prude, and they smoke all the time, and it's just like it's like a prehistoric place to go in the transportation room. And so I'm working in there, and everything that I was just describing is true, but they are the coolest guys in the world. They're funny, goofy people. And you could bring anything up that no, like one day I go, hey, where do we get spam and eggs for breakfast? And they go, oh my gosh, I know 6 places. Get in the truck, and they just go. They take you to it, and they were those kind of guys. So I'd never been in the environment with those guys before, and it was cool. Really, really cool bunch of guys, and so newborn respect for all of them.
So I'm just flicking through the book. I'm just looking at all of the the Kelvin universe weapons and other bits and bobs that were in your book.
Then, so of course, so you're then involved, if you don't mind me asking, so Star Trek Discovery comes along. You design the Shenzhou, you design the Discovery, and of course, then you're involved in redesigning the classic Enterprise. And I mean, this is now the second very different interpretation of the same Star Trek universe that you're involved in the redesign. Like, surely at some point there is some ricochet or some whiplash where you're feeling going like, this is hard to keep up with at this point.
You know, the whole concept is funny because you're designing for a future science fiction world to begin with. And then when they ask you to go back in time in that futuristic show, and then sometimes the other way, even further in the future, you have to use that kind of central show as your grounding mark. And so you take it in design wise, you take it a little bit in the past or a little bit in the future. And it's very interesting, the whole philosophy behind it, but it always opens the doors for wonderful things to do. And Enterprise did that because everything was pre TOS and the Matt Jeffries stuff. And it was really very fun to take that stuff back. But with Discovery, it was even more different because we had to fill a gap that they designed. It's only like supposed to be 10, 12 years before Captain Kirk. And so we all had an idea of what that architecture would be. And one of our showrunners wanted to create a kind of a different look of the ships and stuff. And he goes, let's do all our designs that don't include round nacelles. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's kind of the key element of the architecture of the time. And so we had to create this entirely new world of ships that fit his design idea. And so we're trying to figure out a way to explain all these things. And he really liked flat ships. He liked things that are flat. And with the Discovery, he pulled out one of the old Ken Adams and Ralph McQuarrie ideas that they were coming up in the 70s. And he gave me one of the sketches. He goes, let's make our Discovery based on this Ralph McQuarrie and Ken Adams drawing. And so that's where the Discovery started from. But to answer all the other ones, they were all very, very flat. I think I drew at least 150 different ship ideas, and they picked all the flat ones that were in there. And so the designer we had was Mark Worthington for a spell, and then Todd Chernowski. And we had to, I don't know, I always kind of like come up with a backstory why things are the way they are. And I don't think it was ever mentioned outside of just the art department. But we decided, what if we make these ships, they're an experimental era, because we had that kind of spore drive going majorly in the earlier scripts. Now, what if it's like in the experimental days where they go like at Edwards Air Force Base in the 40s when they were trying to break the sound barrier? Every company was creating these unusual craft to be the one to break that sound barrier. And none of them looked the same, but they all had the same goal. And I thought, what do you say we make that the premise that these are all experimental ships? And he goes, that's a cool idea. So we kind of set that into motion. And no one had named the classes of the ships at that time. And I go, what do you say we also do the class names? The writers always, or most of the time, will choose the name of the ships, but they don't kind of concentrate on the classes. So I go, what do you say we name them all after aviation and space pioneers? And he goes, that's another great idea. And so we started doing, like, Chuck Yeager has a ship. We did the Walker class, which is the Shenzhou. We did a gentleman I can't think of his name now, but he wrote the poem High Flight. And English, he was an English World War One pilot that he sadly passed away in an aviation accident very young. I think 21 years old.
Shepherd?
No, I
We
can't think.
have
No.
John Gillespie McGee Jr.
John Gillespie Jr. He wrote the poem High Flight while he was flying, and I thought, let's name a class of ship after him. And they scoured quite a different set of genres between different countries that had aviation stuff, and so they once they picked all the ships we had, they kind of concentrated a little bit more on the U.S. history just by the ships they chose. But it was fun to do that, and we named one the Cardenas class,
Yep.
and by
Yes.
a gentleman named Robert Cardenas. And I had heard about him. He was the pilot that flew the B-29 that dropped Chuck Yeager for the sound-breaking flight, the first flight. And so I named one after him and one after uh, oh gosh, what was his name? All these names now. Yeah, but anyways, the Robert Cardenas one, he his family wrote me and says I thought he had passed away. He goes, Robert's still with us, and he would love to talk to you about this. So I got to actually
Ah.
meet him, and the Eagle Moss ship had just come out, so I took him one of those with his class on it, and he his office is all filled with aviation memorabilia, and so he parts these two flying wing models that he had on his desk and put that little ship in there. He goes, ooh, this is a special place here. It's a really cool little gentleman, and he just passed away a couple years ago. But he was 100 years old when I met him, sharp as a tack, and he had the stories to tell. And he goes, I'm not familiar with Star Trek that much, but I'm gonna have to go watch it. And so he called me, goes, I started with the Kirk stuff, and they're really pretty cool. And so that was really fun to have that happen. And named after a couple other guys, but it was cool. It was really a fun way to kind of answer that whole spectrum of interestingly odd architecture in the middle of a world where you think it would be something different.
I think it's such an excellent way of looking at it, because to have all of them named experiment, it sort of kind of addresses any questions you might have, like, oh, why doesn't this look like that? And we were doing round nacelles at this time, and now we're not doing that. It's like, it's grand. It's the experimental. It was Star Trek's grunge phase. Or Star, yeah. Not to say that they're grungy before I am killed by the fans. But no, I have to say I really love them, and I mean, I remember. So I watched the finale of Discovery season 1 as it was always meant to be watched, on my phone, sitting on a bus on the way to work.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that is so it was in a little 6-inch screen or something, and I'm sure the people sitting on the bus must have gone, what is wrong with that guy over there? The squeals that are coming out of him as we're getting an emergency hail from who? Here it goes. It's the Enterprise, and it flies in, and I literally looked at it and just went, Yep, I like that one. That'll do.
There you go. Yeah, that was another one I was kind of telling you about, that we work from home now. We're not a part of the whole process. And when we got the note to do that Enterprise, my friend Scott Schneider and we actually did physical models together, and he became a CG modeler. Really fantastic, incredible modeler. We got tasked with doing that Enterprise. And another gentleman named Joe Shu, he was the Canadian art director on it. He was kind of integrating with us. And so our purpose was to design an Enterprise that had the Discovery era elements, but had to be very, very close to the Matt Jeffries ship. And so we designed the Enterprise that it would be a retrofit away. So you basically took things off of the Enterprise that we did in concept form. I think it's in the book, the one that we did the most work on. And so it's just a matter of scaling things down and taking elements off, and that would give you the TOS Enterprise. And we had this idea of, what if we did it with like sections of bare metal and paint as an experimental thing? So we had pieces where it'd be bare metal and you'd have the gray paint. So you could see where the architecture was going, where it was going to be when we hit the Captain Kirk era. And so we designed it that whole way. This nacelle struts are straight and they're a little bit wider. They have a gap in them. And we designed that to be like a natural cooling vent to keep the warp core tubes clean and cool. And you just take the back half off and that would be the TOS strut. And so we got all that done, got it approved. It went away. And then when the show airs, it flies by and Scott and I called each other. Were those nacelle struts angled like the motion picture? And he goes, I think so. And so all this happened outside of where we left off. And you kind of forget sometimes that you're a stepping stone. You do one part and then someone takes over to something else. So somewhere between what we turned in and what aired on the show, they did that angled nacelle thing. And both of Scott and I were going, oh shoot, they just breached the TOS to the motion picture via that particular change that they put on it. But it was cool. Once it grew on me after I realized, like, okay, it's a stepping. We just did our part and it turned into this. It was cool. It was cool to see. Really pretty fantastic what they did. And yeah, that was the purpose of those drawings, to take it one step away.
That's actually, because I can imagine now my head, I'm coming up with the story. So there's a Starfleet Corps of Engineers. You know, we have this. So let's say this is now the OG Enterprise, launched 2245. It flies around. It comes in for a refit around 2265, and they go, I wonder if, let's straighten those struts for a while. And it goes off and it does its 5-year mission, and it comes back in again. They're like, yeah, no, actually, all right, let's angle them back again. Yeah, we did that experiment. So there we go. That's my headcanon. That's how it now works. You know?
Exactly.
I agree.
And so like I was saying, you don't know what happens anymore after art leaves your table. So it's always a grand surprise when you see the end result. So it's like, oh wow, there you go, something different.
It's funny. It reminds me of what I think I was reading an article on the going back the Grumal model that resurfaced. I think it was season 6 of DS9 as a Klingon cargo ship, and I was like, it's got the Cardassian bits are still on it, but it now has warp nacelles. And I remember reading, now I might be getting this wrong, but I remember reading going that there can be a thing once the design is handed in, once it's done, that's then up to whatever the producers want to do with it. You know, that can end up anywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
That's about right. And yeah, it's just different worlds when you go back to Deep Space Nine and Enterprise, because like I was saying, we're all in the same room working together, even though the VFX was just down the street. But they would come down all the time and they'd go, hey, I'm coming down. I'm working on this particular ship. I wanted to get some feedback on it. And it's interesting. You know, the artist Brian Froud, I'm sure you know of him. He was the gentleman Jim Hansen hired to do Labyrinth and Dark Crystal. And I remember hearing him mention something one time as an artist. It stuck with me forever. And he said, I try to draw things in sketch form, and I leave areas open because someone's going to take over after me as an artist. And if I do all the work for them, they're just copying and they don't get to add their artistic influence. And so I thought that's pretty amazing. And so I kind of adopted that philosophy when I do ships, because I know someone's going to take over after. And if you do everything for them, they don't have that opportunity to be creative as well. And so that's why I kind of like when they approve a 3/4, I'll try to do everything in a 3/4 sketch. And that leaves a lot of areas open for the next guy that takes over to add what they want to add into it. Every once in a while, they'll want schematics, and I'll try and keep those crude as well, just to leave those doors open. And it works out nice because you get to see a lot of fabulous creativity and a lot of things I will see I would never have thought of doing it that way. And it's like, wow, I'm glad they added that in because I didn't think that way. But it's really cool. Like I was saying, the collaboration of going from one hand to another is really pretty remarkable. And then when you see it on the screen, it's just, you just get all giddy. So it's pretty cool.
I love that. And even in a way, like the Enterprise, as in the full lineage of the Enterprise itself, you can really see that. You know, you have Matt Jeffrey's earliest designs, and, you know, in variations, you can see the adaptation of that as it goes along and even continues to. I mean, the Enterprise F is clearly very heavily inspired by the Enterprise E. And then the Enterprise G goes back to the Constitution class as well. The Enterprise J sort of looks like a flying city, which I love. There's a beautiful, beautiful master actually came out recently of the Enterprise J that I think is just a stunning design. Mike, you probably know the one I'm talking about. Where it came out, was it? It's the company that does the tour of all the Enterprise bridges. The Roddenberry Archive. Sorry,
yes, they no longer have them, but yeah.
Yes, I think I remember you saying this. I should be saying this to you off camera. But anyway, yes. So they did this beautiful realization of the Enterprise J and making it look like the colony ship, like I believe. And you can see the same idea, saucer section and the nacelles of Matt Jeffrey's design in there. And it's like, here's the sketch. Now do your bit. Now do your bit. Now add your part to the story. And that is, I mean, I love that.
Yeah, that was Doug Drexler design, and it was funny because it was supposed to only be seen on playback, just a little image on a playback screen, and it's great that it's gone beyond that, where you have an Eagle Moss ship, you got model kits, you got fan art, and it's cool that it went way beyond what it was minimally supposed to be to a big fan favorite ship, and it's a beautiful piece. And I love working with Doug, because like I was saying, when I work with Scott Schneider, he's the CG end of things. Doug's the same way. And for Picard, we got to do the same thing. I would do the sketches and work out all the preliminary stuff, and then he would do the CG model, and we're really good friends, so we could like chime in back and forth with each other, which I was saying is missing from a lot of the other opportunities. But when we were doing the Stargazer, we had a great time with the Shrike. I would do the sketches and he would do the 3D models on it, and the same with the Helios and the little shuttlecraft. So it was really great. That was one of my favorite parts, was getting to work with Doug again, even though it was from far away. We weren't in the same room, but it was fun. I'd get his giddy laugh calls, and that's, like I was saying, it's just the collaboration behind these things is so much fun. And I hate the fact that we're not in the same buildings anymore. And I don't know, I must be just because I'm old. I'm more intangible. I like much more being in the same room with people we're working with, and from home you can't feed off anybody. And a lot of times you don't know what the other guy's doing, and if you did, you could take their influence and tie a little bit more with what you're doing in. And so that kind of crisscross of ideas is one of the elements that's missing. You don't really notice it, but things would be a little bit different if you did have that in-house camaraderie where you could see what everyone's doing.
That, I think, is so. I remember when, obviously, 2020 and the apocalypse happened. We had already, like my company, we'd been working from home for a while as well. And the nature of the work that I do is I've been working from home since. So on the one hand, I quite like having a home office. It's good fun and everything. But you're exactly right. In anything that you do, there is a missing element when you are not in the same space. Particularly in creative, because just you could say a word out, somebody says a word and reply, oh, didn't think of that. Perfect. Okay, now we can use that to build on this. So when, I am starting the next Star Trek series, and I, of course, hire you as my head of the art department and head ship designer. So when you bring in Doug and you bring in everyone else, just so you know, we will rent a space for you. That's no problem at all. Mike's already approved the cost. No, I obviously I joke, but that idea, particularly from Star Trek, of reading just how much interpersonal relationships there were, and I think it wouldn't be the franchise that it is if there hadn't been a lot of that.
Yeah, and it's an interesting world as well. All the people I work with, it's one of the rarities where it's a family. No matter if it's a new people coming in or old people coming back together again, everyone has this fandom bond that they grew up with the shows, and I'd say 90% of the people that work on the shows are fans of it. And so they all know about each other via friendships or acquaintances and stuff. So when you get in there, in that little world, that's this family, everyone is out to do their very best and pay homage to what they have to do. And to see that happen is pretty amazing. And again, you only see it now on the end results. And when Terry Matalas came back for seasons 2 and 3 of Picard, he was Brandon Braga and Rick Berman's main guy when we were doing Enterprise. And so he was kind of the runaround gopher guy at the time. And they recognized who he was. He was a scriptwriter. He was an idea guy. And they gave him more opportunities. And a lot of these opportunities opened up in Star Trek that I've never seen happen before. And so because they opened those up to him, he got to write a couple scripts. He became a showrunner on other shows. And then when he got season 2 and 3, he brought back all of that integration that Star Trek needed. He brought back what the fans love because he's a hardcore fan. He knew that bringing back the old Goldsmith and Honer scores, the visual effects for the ships are get more screen time, and they become elements and characters as opposed to just something flying by in space. He remembered all of that stuff and brought it back. And season 3 to me is a gift to everyone that worked on it, and everyone's a fan of Star Trek. You look at that season 3 and it stands out like no other show in the last decade. It's just amazing what he was able to bring in. And again, that's because of that love for the show and the family element. So he was very integral in bringing people back that he had worked with before, and as well as new people. So it was really cool. A very interesting, wonderful little surprise to have season 3 be the way it was.
Yeah, I mean, just even speaking purely from a fan point of view, just getting to watch it, and so many familiar beats, and you could feel that coming across, and it really felt like a family reunion, obviously on screen. And when you're like us and we're like, I can if I just hit play in my head, I could probably play the soundtracks from motion picture right up to Beyond and Beyond. Terrible pun for you there. But so hearing all those passages, there is a sequence in, I think it's in episode 9, and there's another sequence in episode 10 where they're stood on the bridge of the Enterprise D. Massive spoiler, but I guarantee everyone listening to this podcast has seen these episodes. They're standing on the bridge of the Enterprise D, and Dennis McCarthy's theme from Generations plays, and it's really, and it's just like brilliant. Just brilliant, kind of like, and it's little things like that some people may pick up on, some people might not pick up on, and it's just those little special bits that make the difference.
Oh gosh, yeah, and it was fun with season 1 of Picard, the kind of hockey sparrow ship that flies out of the nebula. I think it's episode 1, maybe 2.
Oh yes, I know the very one.
They play the old TOS Romulan theme over the top of it. And when you watch the old shows, TOS and stuff, that was so heavily music driven. I mean, you can hear the Doomsday Machine any day of the week when you hear the theme. The same thing with the Tomorrow's Yesterday. Those particular themes made Star Trek even more wonderful than it was, and to have that brought back, it was like, oh my gosh, what a gift! What a great gift to have that.
So I'm going to say, so you've been so generous with your time, so thank you very much. So I'm going to come up toward the end of this particular episode. Now, I feel like we could have like an entire series. So if you could just block off the next couple of weeks, and if we could just book you in, that'd be perfect.
One a day.
Yeah, one a day. Perfect. But before I go on to my last question, I just want to say just a massive thank you, John, just for everything that you've done for us as fans. And I can tell you're such a fan yourself, because it just comes across in the excitement that when you speak about Star Trek. So just thank you so much for coming on and talking to us. And I mean, thanks for the flipping Enterprise E, man. I mean, like, yeah, like, do you know what I mean?
Well, it's a great pleasure to talk to you guys. So I'm very honored you had me on. So always fun to talk about these things, and it's great. It's great to share stuff that people don't know or you don't get to talk about. So it's good time, and I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Well, pleasure. And actually, before I forget, I've a message to pass along, which is from my partner, whose favorite Star Trek film is Star Trek First Contact. And he says, because it's got my favorite Enterprise in it, and because it's birthday, is First Contact Day.
Oh, there you go. Very good.
So yeah, so I wanted to pass that across. So now I have a last question for you, which we ask of all of our guests. Nice, easy question, requires no thought whatsoever. John Eaves, what does Star Trek mean to you?
What does Star Trek mean to me? Oh, wow. Hard to say. Taking it from a science fiction fan, it's my favorite show. Always been my favorite show. And it's, gosh, I don't know how to put that in words. It's become not a career, but it's been a part of my life. And so it has brought more fun and more joy and more satisfaction than anything in kind of a working environment and a fan environment. So I have to say it's just been a great blessing to be a fan and be a part of it. So it's brought decades and decades of great memories and great times, great friendships. So I'd say Star Trek is probably friendships, and that I've met more people, fellow fans and fellow workers, than any other thing I've ever worked on. So definitely Star Trek is a family event.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. John, thank you very, very much. I think this is just about Mike. I think you can agree this has been a bit special.
Oh, definitely.
Well, like I said, a great pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Oh, not at all. For everyone now who is listening and watching along with this podcast, where is the best place to reach out to you, to see your work, to get in touch with you, John?
I had a website, johneavesart.com, and I had it on Webs, and it looks like Webs has just closed. And so I don't know if my site is still up or if it has gone down, but I got a note to transfer everything to another service. So I'm going to go to Wix. So if that doesn't work for you, that's where all my stuff is. And that's about the best one. I have a Facebook page, and it's just my name. And those two places are about the best ones.
Okay, perfect. So a link to a page will be in the description of this podcast. We currently we don't know where it's going, but it'll be to one of those places.
It opened yesterday, so it was there as of 24 hours ago. So hopefully it's still there. But yeah, I was loading pages into the Star Trek thing just about 2 weeks ago, and all of a sudden I couldn't load anything else. Like, what's going on? And then I never got an explanation for it. And then I got this email. I go, oh, they canceled the program for loading things up right in the middle of my adding thing. So, okay, that answered that. So moving on, and I'll keep in touch and let you know where it is.
Oh, perfect. So everyone listening along, thank you very much for listening and joining us. We have had an absolute ball this week talking to John Eaves. We'll be back next week with another episode of The War Room. I have been Sean. I have been joined by the wonderful Mike. And thank you, everyone. Live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper. That's the best I can do.